A debt-pressed plantation owner parades a quiet child into the grandest house on the river, expecting laughter from the crowd. But when she opens her mouth, crystal chandeliers seem to dim as her voice rises pure and true. Then a lawyer waves official freedom papers, and the child points to a single, deadly detail. "That wax ain't courthouse wax," she whispers. Thunder crashes outside. Rain lashes the windows. No one can leave. In the trapped silence, a hidden quilt reveals papers sewn in secret, a stolen ring surfaces, and ledger books expose years of lies. The storm rages. Church bells toll through the darkness. Come morning, the courthouse steps fill with witnesses. A child's sharp eyes have torn down a house of fraud, but when the truth is read aloud, will it free an innocent soul, or destroy everyone who dared to listen? The kettle hissed on the plantation kitchen hearth as daybreak crept through the shutters. Lark tied the blue ribbon at her wrist, fingers working the knot while she listened. 3 steps away, Cassius Barrow coughed blood into his palm and tried to hide it behind his coffee cup. She began to hum, low and steady, the tune her locket held pressed between tin and glass. The same hymn she'd hummed over his dying wife 2 winters past. Cassius's ragged breathing caught the rhythm, slowed, found its pace. His shoulders dropped. "She remembers what the Lord once kept," old Moses said from the stove. The stable hand's voice was soft as he ground willow bark with the heel of his hand. "That hymn comes when it's needed." Cassius wiped his mouth. The blood was dark, but less than yesterday. Lark's humming had pulled him back from whatever edge he'd been walking. She always knew when to start, when to hold a note, when to let it fade. The locket at her throat caught the morning light, a scrap of hymn page visible through the clouded glass, a blue wax seal pressed into one corner. "Keep that hymn right there," Moses said, tapping the locket as steam rose from his herb pot. Outside, a horse splashed through the yard. Cassius straightened, set down his cup. The rider who swung down from his mount wore fine wool despite the early hour. Behind him, Silas Pike, the plantation overseer, hurried from the barn. Lark stepped closer to the window. She knew that face, Deputy Rawlings, who carried papers from Judge Fairling's court. His saddlebags bulged with documents. Pike reached them first, bowed low, spoke words she couldn't catch. The conversation moved to the porch. Cassius joined them, still pale from his coughing fit. Lark heard numbers, dollars, and dates. Pike's voice rose, eager and sharp. Then laughter from Rawlings, not the good kind. "Bring the little songbird," Rawlings said, loud enough for the kitchen to hear. "Judge Fairling's hosting his river gala tomorrow. Would be a fine joke, parading her among the ladies." Cassius said nothing for a long moment. Lark saw his hand tighten on the porch rail. Pride was a poison in his blood, Moses always said. Pride and debt made men do foolish things. "I'll consider it," Cassius said. Pike laughed. "Consider? Sir, with respect, you owe too much to consider. The judge likes his entertainment, and that child's got tricks worth showing." Rawlings mounted his horse. "Tomorrow at 7. River Landing. Don't disappoint." He spurred his horse forward, sending a muddy arc across the porch boards. The splash reached Lark's bare feet through the kitchen door. She looked down at the dark spots on her blue ribbon, then up at Cassius as he came inside. His face was set like stone, but she could see the tremor in his hands. "Pack a clean dress," he said without looking at her. "We're going visiting." Moses set down his grinding stone. "Mr. Cassius, sir, I've decided." Cassius's voice was flat. "If they want entertainment, they'll have it." An hour later, Lark walked the lane toward the main road. The mint patch grew wild here, and she picked a sprig for Moses's tea. The sun climbed higher, warming the ribbon at her wrist. "Morning, child?" Lark turned. Mercy Tomlin stood beside her gate, a water bucket in one hand, a basket in the other. The young Quaker woman's dress was plain grey wool, her bonnet crisp white. But her eyes were kind. "Morning, Miss Mercy. That's a sweet tune you're humming. Mind if I hear it plain?" Lark sang a verse, clear and low. Something moved in Mercy's face, recognition, maybe worry. "Where did you learn that song?" "It's in my locket, from before I came here." Mercy set down her bucket. "Will you trade me that mint for something?" Lark held out the sprig. Mercy took it, breathed the scent, then reached into her basket. She pulled out a folded paper, small enough to hide in a palm. "If trouble starts," Mercy said, pressing the note into Lark's hand, "ask for me. Someone will know how to find me." "What kind of trouble?" "The kind that comes when folks with power get bored." Mercy's voice was gentle but serious. "Patrollers will be thick near the Gala. Keep your eyes down, your voice soft. But if you need help—" She touched Lark's hand where the paper was hidden. "I recognized your song, child. It's older than you know." That evening, Cassius hitched the mule to the wagon. Pike climbed up beside him, rifle across his knees. The Gala was 5 miles downriver, at Judge Fairling's grand house with its wide porches and dock pilings. They reached the crossroads as the sun touched the horizon. A patroller waited there, his horse stamping in the dust. He wore a brass badge and carried papers in his coat. "Passes," the patroller said. Cassius produced a folded document from his vest. "Household pass, 1 overseer, 1 property." The patroller unfolded the paper, studied the seal. Lark watched his face, the way his eyes moved over the wax stamp. River County blue, not courthouse red. She'd seen both colors before, when Cassius had papers to file. Blue was for smaller matters. Red was for the court itself. "This seal's not right," the patroller said slowly. Pike shifted in his seat. "How do you mean, sir?" "Colors off. Should be courthouse red for Judge Fairling's district." The patroller folded the paper, handed it back. "But it'll do for tonight. Judge knows you're coming." As they drove away, Lark heard Pike mutter something about seals and colors, but the patroller had let them pass, and that was what mattered. Judge Fairling's house blazed with lamplight when they arrived. Carriages filled the drive. Ladies in silk gowns stepped carefully from their seats, gentlemen in dark coats offering their arms. A string quartet played on the wide porch, their music drifting over the river. "Remember," Cassius said, as they climbed down from the wagon, "you speak when spoken to. Nothing more." Lark nodded. The blue ribbon felt tight around her wrist. The front door opened to reveal a chandelier bright as daylight. Crystal drops caught the flame of a dozen candles, throwing rainbow spots on the walls. Ladies fanned themselves in the heat. Gentlemen gathered around a table where papers were spread, maps, maybe, or shipping manifests. "Cassius Barrow," Judge Fairling approached with arms wide. He was a large man with silver hair and a gold watch chain. "And this must be the famous songbird." Lark kept her eyes down, but she could feel the room watching. Conversation slowed. Someone laughed, high and nervous. "She's quite the novelty," Cassius said. His voice carried false brightness. "Knows every tune she's ever heard. Does she now?" Dr. Pierce stepped forward, adjusting his spectacles. Remarkable memory in the lower classes. Limited, of course, but fascinating. He spoke a line in Latin, testing. Before Lark could think, she repeated it back. Every syllable, exact. The room went quiet. Dr. Pierce's mouth fell open. "Good Lord," someone whispered. The quartet struck up a waltz, and Lark found herself humming along not just the melody, but a harmony line older than the music they played. Her voice rose clear and true, weaving through their strings like silver thread. Jaws that had dropped in mockery now parted in wonder. "Where on earth, Doctor?" Pierce began. "She remembers everything," Mercy Tomlin said quietly. She'd been standing near the back wall, unnoticed until now. Every song, every word. "I recognize that harmony. It's from the old hymnal, the one with the root songs." Cassius's face went pale. Root songs meant something different to people like Mercy. Underground signals. Maps sung in verse. Young lawyer Silas Cotter stepped into the center of the room, a document in his hands. "Speaking of remarkable documents," he said with a smile, "I've brought something to show the judge. Authentic freedom papers for my man Tobias here." He gestured to a well-dressed black man standing near the door. "Paid good money for these. Proper courthouse seal and everything." He unfolded the papers with a flourish. "Straight from the clerk's office, Judge. Ephraim Lyle himself pressed this seal." The judge took the papers, examined them. "Fine work. The seal looks authentic." Lark moved closer, drawn by something wrong in what she saw. The seal was perfect, too perfect. The letterforms were crisp, but the wax— "That wax ain't the courthouse wax," she said. The words fell into silence like stones into still water. "I beg your pardon?" Cotter's smile faltered. Lark pointed to the blue seal at the bottom of the papers. Courthouse wax is red, deep red, like garnets. That there's Clark's wax, blue like river stones. From another county altogether. Every eye in the room fixed on the papers in Judge Fairling's hands. The judge's face had gone serious, the party atmosphere evaporating like mist. "Child," he said carefully, "are you certain of this?" "Yes, sir." Seen both kinds when Master Cassius files papers. Red for the court, blue for the clerk's daily business. That blue's wrong for freedom papers. Cotter's face had gone white. She doesn't know. She knows seals, Mercy said quietly, and colours, and what belongs where. Judge Fairling folded the papers carefully. "We'll examine this at first light," he said, "with proper wax samples and witnesses." The storm that had been threatening all evening finally broke. Rain lashed the windows. Thunder shook the house. No one would be travelling home tonight. Cassius found himself sitting in the judge's back parlour with the other stranded guests. The party had turned into something else, a trial waiting to happen. His joke had become a courtroom, and Lark was either a miracle or the end of everything he had left. Outside, lightning split the sky, and the wind howled like judgment coming down the river. The storm trapped them all, creditors and debtors, judge and accused, child and overseer, in Judge Fairling's back rooms, with nothing but thunder for conversation. "Doctor." Pierce set up an infirmary of sorts in the judge's study, spreading tonics and bandages on the wide desk. The older ladies claimed the settees. Men huddled near the fireplace, speaking in low voices about wax colours and forged papers. Lark sat on a wooden stool beside the window, watching lightning fork across the river. The ferry lines had snapped in the wind. The landing dock tilted at a dangerous angle, half submerged. No one was crossing tonight. Pike paced like a caged animal. Every few minutes he'd stop near Lark, scowl down at her, then resume his circuit. She could feel his anger like heat from a forge. "That child don't know what she's talking about," he muttered to Cassius. Caused trouble over nothing. But Cassius wasn't listening. He sat slumped in the judge's chair, coughing into his handkerchief. The blood was coming faster now, dark spots that wouldn't stop. Lark rose from her stool. Without thinking, she knelt beside his chair and began to hum. The same hymn from the morning, but softer now, timed to his breathing. 3 beats in, hold, 4 beats out. Her locket caught the firelight as she leaned close. Cassius's breathing began to match the rhythm. His shoulders relaxed. The coughing eased. Dr. Pierce watched from across the room, his medical bag forgotten. "Remarkable," he murmured. "She's regulating his breathing, like a living metronome." "It's the hymn," Mercy said. She'd been sitting quietly in the corner, working on some needlework. Old hymns had patterns built into them, for healing, for work, for memory. This one's for breathing. The wind gusted, rattling the shutters. Through the rain-streaked glass, Lark could see the river rising, brown water lapping at the judge's garden stones. "We can't stay here all night." "Doctor," Pierce said, "Mrs. Henderson needs proper rest, and young Timothy's fever is climbing. But in this storm—" "I know the dry paths," Lark said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. "The hymn," she continued, "it's got directions in it, where to step when the water's high. Mercy's right about it being a root song." She began to sing, her voice clear over the storm noise. "Wade through the willows where the cypress bends, 3 stones from the landing where the dry path ends. Follow the lantern to the chapel door. Safe harbor waits where it waited before." "There's more verses," she said. "They map the whole way to the church basement. Dry ground, even in flood." Judge Fairling leaned forward. "You're certain of this path?" "Yes, sir. The song's never wrong." Within an hour, they'd formed a strange procession. Lark led, humming the root verses and pointing out the stones that stayed above water. Mercy carried little Timothy, whose fever had broken during Lark's breathing song. Dr. Pierce and 2 other men brought up the rear with the ladies and the makeshift stretchers. The church basement smelled of old hymn books and stored quilts. Oil lamps cast dancing shadows on the stone walls. Someone found a crate of preserves. Another discovered a trunk full of church records and ledgers. "At least we're dry," Mrs. Henderson said, settling onto a folded quilt. Mercy was examining the trunk's contents more carefully. "Lark," she called softly, "come, look at this." Lark left her spot by the oil lamp and knelt beside Mercy. The Quaker woman held a quilt whose binding looked strange, lumpy in places, as if something were sewn inside the stitching. "Feel along here," Mercy said, guiding Lark's fingers to a thick section. There was paper inside the binding, old paper, folded small and sewn tight into the quilt's edge. "Should we open it?" Lark asked. "Not open," Mercy said carefully, "but we might examine what shows." She worked at the stitching until a corner of the hidden paper became visible. Written in faded ink, just 2 words, "River Song," and below that, what looked like a legal phrase, "Manumission Clause." Mercy breathed. "It's a manumission clause, hidden in the binding." Lark stared at the partial words. "What's that mean?" "It means someone hid freedom papers in this quilt. Legal language that could set a person free if the right conditions were met." Mercy's eyes were bright with possibilities. "The phrase mentions a girl with a river song." Lark, that could mean what? Pike's voice cut through the basement, quiet. He'd been listening from the shadows near the stairs. Mercy quickly covered the binding with her hand. Nothing. Just old church records. But Pike had seen enough. He stepped closer, his boots heavy on the stone floor. "That looked like papers to me. And we're here because this child caused trouble with papers." "Leave it be," Cassius said from his spot against the far wall. But his voice was weak. Pike ignored him. "Hand over that quilt, woman. If there's something in there that pertains to my master's property, I've got a right to see it." "Your master's given no such order," Mercy replied calmly. "Don't need his order. I'm tasked with keeping order, and order means no secret papers, no hidden documents." Pike reached for the quilt. That's when Lark noticed the small wooden box tucked behind the trunk. While Pike and Mercy faced off over the quilt, she eased the box open. Inside, nestled in faded silk, was a ring. Heavy gold with a family crest carved into the seal, the same crest that was pressed into the blue wax on the scrap in her locket. Her breath caught. She lifted the ring carefully, held it to the lamplight. The crest matched exactly a ship's anchor crossed with a wheat sheaf, circled by rope. "Mercy," she whispered. The Quaker woman looked over, saw the ring in Lark's hands. Her face went white. "Where did you find that?" "In the box. It's the same crest that's in my locket, the same mark that's on the blue wax." Pike spun around. "What are you two whispering about?" But before anyone could answer, Cassius collapsed. The coughing fit took him without warning. Blood came up dark and thick. He couldn't catch his breath, couldn't speak. His face went grey. Lark dropped the ring and rushed to his side. She knelt in the lamplight, placed her hands on his chest, and began her hymn again. This time she counted his heartbeats, matched them to the rhythm. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats, pause. Slowly, impossibly, color returned to his face. His breathing steadied. The bleeding stopped. "How does she do that?" Dr. Pierce asked in wonder. "It's the pattern," Mercy said. "The hymn has healing built into it. Old knowledge, passed down." Cassius gripped Lark's wrist, the one with the blue ribbon. His eyes were clear now, focused on her face. "If the Lord lets me stand come morning," he said hoarsely, "I'll set right what you showed me tonight." Pike's face had gone dark with anger. "Set right? Sir, you're talking fever talk. That child's your property, bought and paid for, and if there's papers hidden in church quilts, they don't change. What's written in ledgers?" "What ledgers?" Judge Fairling asked quietly. He'd been standing near the stairs, listening to everything. Pike realized his mistake too late. "I meant general ledgers, sir, household accounts." "No," the judge said slowly. "You meant specific ledgers. Ledgers that might contain records related to this child." The basement went quiet, except for the storm still raging above. Everyone looked at Pike, whose face had gone from angry to trapped. "Bring my ledgers from the house," Judge Fairling ordered. "All of them. We'll examine every entry by lamplight. Sir, in this storm, now." Pike had no choice. He climbed the stairs, water dripping from his coat. While he was gone, Mercy worked at the quilt binding again. More of the hidden paper became visible. Legal language in careful script. "Shall be deemed free and clear of all bonds should the bearer of the river song present herself with proper witness and seal. It's a conditional manumission." Mercy explained to Lark. "Someone hid freedom papers in this binding, tied to a specific sign, the river song. You're him, but who would do that? Someone who loved you. Someone who wanted to protect you but couldn't do it openly. Lark touched her locket. The blue wax seal caught the lamplight, and for the first time she could see the crest clearly. The same anchor and wheat sheaf from the ring. The wax, she said suddenly. The blue wax in my locket. It's not Clark's wax. It's sealing wax. Personal sealing wax. From someone's private ring, Mercy agreed. Someone who pressed their crest into wax and hid it with your hymn page. When Pike returned with the ledgers, his hands were shaking. Not from cold, but from fear. Judge Fairling opened the first book, ran his finger down columns of names and dates. Here, he said after a few minutes. Interesting entry. One female infant, sold to sea. Barrow Estate, payment received in full. He looked up at Pike. But here's what's curious. There's another entry on the next page. Same date, same infant. Transport delayed. Child remains in county care. Pike's face went white. Which means, the judge continued, either the same child was sold twice, or one of these entries is false. Accidents happen, Pike muttered. Clerk's mistakes. Perhaps, but the dates are in different hands, different ink. One entry was made weeks after the other. The judge closed the ledger carefully. That suggests deliberate deception. Mercy held up the ring from the wooden box. Whose seal is this? She asked the judge. Judge Fairling took the ring, examined the crest. His face went very still. This is my seal, he said quietly. My family crest. I thought this ring was lost years ago. He looked at the blue wax in Lark's locket, then back at the ring. Someone used my seal to mark that wax. Someone who had access to my private ring and sealing materials. All eyes turned to Pike. The overseer had backed up, against the stone wall. Trapped. I don't know nothing about rings, he said. Then you won't mind if we compare the wax colors in the morning light, the judge said, with proper witnesses. That's when Pike made his move. He lunged for the quilt binding, tore off the section with the hidden papers, and thrust it toward the oil lamp flame. The old fabric caught instantly. No hidden papers, he snarled, no secret freedom clauses, no tricks from uppity. But he never finished the sentence. Cassius, moving faster than anyone expected from a sick man, knocked Pike away from the lamp. The burning cloth fell to the stone floor, where Mercy stamped out the flames. Half the binding was burned, but the crucial words remained: river song and proper witness and seal. You just confirmed everything we suspected, Judge Fairling said to Pike. An innocent man wouldn't burn evidence. Pike's face twisted with rage. Before anyone could stop him, he grabbed Lark by the arm and dragged her toward the stairs. If this child's testimony is all that stands between me and a rope, he said, then this child won't be testifying. He hauled her up the stairs and out into the storm. The rain hit like cold hammers. Wind nearly knocked them both down. Pike dragged Lark across the flooded churchyard toward a line of outbuildings barely visible in the darkness. Behind them, she could hear voices, Mercy calling her name, men shouting orders. But Pike knew the ground better than they did. He pulled her behind a smokehouse, out of sight from the church. You should have kept quiet, he panted. Should have sung your songs and stayed out of grown folks' business. Lightning lit the sky, and in that brief flash Lark saw something that made her heart race. Dogs. Pike had brought hunting dogs, and they were loose in the storm. Hounds'll keep your friends busy, Pike said with satisfaction. Give me time to get you somewhere safe, somewhere you can't cause trouble. But as the dogs approached, Lark did something that made Pike's eyes go wide. She raised her hand, palm out, and hummed a single note. Perfect pitch, low and clear. The dogs stopped, mid-stride, mid-bark. They sat in the rain and looked at her with something like reverence. How did you? Pike began. Animals know the old songs, Lark said simply. They remember what people forgot. And while Pike stood gaping, she began to sing the root hymn again. But this time she wasn't leading people to safety. She was calling for help. The hymn carried over the storm like a bell calling the faithful to prayer. From inside the church basement, Mercy heard it first, the same melody they'd followed through the flood, but with different urgency now. She's calling us, Mercy said, grabbing a lantern from the wall. That's not the root song anymore. That's a distress call. Deputy Whit Crowder had arrived at the church just as Pike dragged Lark outside. He was soaked through but determined, with Jonah Reed, the boatman, behind him. They'd fought the flooded roads to reach the church after hearing about the forged papers. "Which way?" Crowder asked. "Follow the song," Mercy said. They pushed through the rain, Mercy's lantern creating a small circle of light in the darkness. The hymn guided them past the fallen oak, around the worst of the flooding, toward the outbuildings behind the church property. But Lark was being clever about it. Even as Pike forced her deeper into the maze of sheds and smokehouses, she was using the song to lay a trail. Each verse pointed them toward a landmark: the broken cart, the leaning fence post, the old well. Pike didn't understand what she was doing. He thought she was just frightened, singing to calm herself. He didn't know the hymn was a map. "Stop that noise," he ordered, when they reached a sagging smokehouse at the property's edge. "We're waiting here till this storm passes and the road's clear." "Where we going then?" Lark asked. "South, where folks understand proper order and children know their place." Pike tied her hands with rope, but loosely. He was more focused on listening for pursuit than on making secure knots, which was his first mistake. Lark tested the rope while Pike peered through the smokehouse's cracked door. The knots were clumsy, tied in haste. She could work her hands free, given time. Outside, the storm was weakening but still dangerous. Rain fell steady instead of driving. Thunder rumbled distant instead of cracking overhead. That meant the search party could move faster. Pike had made his second mistake by choosing the smokehouse. It only had one door, which made it a trap if anyone found them, and Lark could hear voices getting closer. She needed to distract Pike until help arrived. So she did what she'd always done when men's tempers ran hot. She started a conversation. "Why are you so afraid of papers?" she asked. Pike spun around. "I ain't afraid of nothing." "Then why burn the quilt binding? If you done nothing wrong, what's it matter what old papers say?" "Because papers lie sometimes, and judges believe what they want to believe." "What about the ring? The one with the seal that matches my locket?" Pike's face went ugly. "That ring don't prove nothing. Seals get lost, get stolen. Could have ended up anywhere." "Could have," Lark agreed. "But it ended up in the same box as church records. Records that go back years. That's a strange place for a stolen ring to hide. You don't know what you're talking about. I know you've been sweating since I mentioned wax colors. I know you tried to burn evidence, and I know something else too." Pike stepped closer. "What? You've been using the judge's ring for your own purposes, making false seals, forging papers. That's why you recognized the wax colors so quick when I said they was wrong." Pike's hand moved to his belt, where he kept a knife. That's when Lark played her final card. She began to untie her hands behind her back while she kept talking. "The ledger entries the judge read, the double sale? That was you, wasn't it? Sold the same infant twice. Once on paper to Master Cassius, once in truth to someone else. Kept both payments. Shut your mouth. Except something went wrong. The real buyer never collected their purchase. So you were stuck with a child you'd already sold on paper, had to bring me to Master Cassius's place and pretend like everything was normal." Pike drew the knife. "I said shut up, but you kept the judge's ring," Lark continued, working the last knot loose. "Kept it for making false documents. That's how you've been cheating folks for years. Last warning, girl." That's when the lantern light appeared outside the smokehouse door. "Pike!" Deputy Crowder's voice was sharp with authority. "Come out with your hands visible." Pike spun toward the door, knife raised, which gave Lark her chance. She slipped the loosened rope and dove for the back corner of the smokehouse, where she'd spotted a loose board earlier. If she could squeeze through. But Pike was faster than she expected. He grabbed her ankle as she tried to crawl through the gap. "She's in here," he shouted. "Try to take me, and I'll cut her throat. Let the child go." Crowder called back. "We can work this out." "No working out. She's ruined everything with her talking and her songs. Should have kept quiet like she was supposed to." Pike hauled Lark back to the center of the smokehouse, but he'd made his third mistake. He'd forgotten about the loose board. Because while he was focused on the front door, Mercy Tomlin squeezed through the gap in back. She came in silent as moonlight, a heavy piece of firewood in her hands. Pike never heard her coming. The blow caught him across the back of the head. He dropped like a felled tree. Lark scrambled away from his unconscious form, rushed to Mercy's arms. "How did you know about the loose board?" Mercy asked. "Saw it when he first dragged me in here. Sometimes it pays attention to ways out." Deputy Crowder pushed through the front door, Jonah Reed behind him. They found Pike unconscious and Lark safe. "What about the evidence?" Mercy asked. "The ring, the burned papers, the ledger entries?" "All safe," Crowder said. "Judge Fairling's got everything locked up tight. Soon as this storm clears, we're holding a proper hearing, with witnesses. And Pike? Pike's going to answer some hard questions about forged documents and stolen children." They made their way back to the church as the rain finally stopped. Grey dawn was breaking over the flooded valley, turning the muddy water silver. Steam rose from the soaked earth. In the basement, they found an odd scene. Judge Fairling sat at a makeshift table made from stacked trunks, examining documents by candlelight. The ring lay beside a stick of sealing wax, red courthouse wax, not the blue clerk's variety. "Doctor?" Pierce tended to Cassius, who was sitting up and looking stronger. "Well?" the judge asked as Lark entered. "Pike confessed to everything while he was threatening her," Mercy said. "Double-selling infants, using your stolen ring to forge documents, keeping false ledger entries." Judge Fairling nodded grimly. "The wax colors match, the ring impressions match. And we found more evidence in Pike's rooms, forged passes, false bills of sale, even counterfeit court seals." He looked at Lark with something like wonder. "Child, your eye for detail just uncovered the largest document fraud this county's seen in 20 years. What happens now?" Lark asked. "Now we go to the courthouse and make things right, publicly, with proper witnesses and legal papers that can't be questioned." Cassius spoke for the first time since his collapse. "Judge, about the child. Yes? If the papers in that quilt binding prove what I think they prove, then she was never legally enslaved to begin with. The original sale was fraudulent." "That appears to be the case." Judge Fairling agreed. "The manumission clause was written by someone with legal knowledge. It refers to specific conditions, the river song, the proper witness, the seal, all of which have now been met." Lark touched her locket. "Who wrote it? Who hid freedom papers in a church quilt?" The judge looked at the ring in his hands. "I believe," he said carefully, "it was someone who loved you very much, someone who knew you might need those papers someday. My mama? Perhaps, or someone acting on her behalf, someone with access to legal language and church records. The truth would have to wait for the courthouse." But as they prepared to leave the basement, Lark felt something shift in the world around her. The storm was over, the flood was receding, and somewhere in the distance, church bells were ringing the dawn. For the first time in her memory, the sound felt like freedom. By the time they reached the courthouse, half the county had gathered on the steps. Word traveled fast in small places, especially word about forgery and fraud involving prominent names. Farmers stood beside merchants, ladies in clean aprons next to gentlemen in Sunday coats. Everyone wanted to witness what happened when a child's sharp eyes brought down a house of lies. Judge Fairling had dried his clothes and combed his hair, but his face remained grim. He carried a wooden box containing the evidence, the ring, the wax samples, the partial quilt binding, and the ledger with its damning double entries. Lark walked between Mercy and Cassius, her blue ribbon catching the morning light. The locket at her throat felt heavier somehow, as if the secret it had carried all these years was finally ready to surface. Ephraim Lyle, the county clerk, had arrived early and set up a table on the courthouse steps. He arranged colored wax sticks like a rainbow, red for courthouse documents, blue for county clerk business, green for township affairs. Each shade had its proper use, its legal meaning. "The first matter," Judge Fairling announced to the crowd, "concerns the authenticity of certain freedom papers. Young lawyer Cotter, present your documents." Silas Cotter stepped forward, his confidence from the previous night now replaced by obvious nervousness. He handed over the papers he'd claimed were authentic. Ephraim Lyle examined the seal under a magnifying glass. Then he selected a stick of blue wax, heated it over a small flame, and pressed it onto a blank paper with his clerk's stamp. The blue matched perfectly. "These papers bear my seal," Lyle announced. "But they are not freedom papers. This is county clerk wax, used for daily business. Freedom papers require courthouse red, pressed with the judge's seal. A murmur ran through the crowd. Forgery was a serious charge. Furthermore, Lyle continued, the letter forms are wrong. The A in authentic has a serif that we stopped using 3 years ago. These papers were copied from an older document. Cotter's face went pale. I purchased those in good faith. From whom? Judge Fairling asked. From Pike. Silas Pike. He said he had connections. And where is Mr. Pike now? Deputy Crowder stepped forward, Pike in shackles beside him. The overseer looked like a man who'd spent the night in a cell, which he had. Your Honor, Crowder said, the defendant wishes to make a statement. Pike cleared his throat. With his schemes exposed and his escape failed, he chose confession over further lies. I've been forging documents for 5 years, he said, starting with small things, work passes, travel papers, then bigger items, bills of sale, land transfers, even freedom papers for folks willing to pay. Using whose seal? Pike's eyes flicked to the ring in Judge Fairling's hands. I took that ring from the judge's office 3 years back, used it to make false courthouse seals. Nobody questioned documents with the right crest. And the ledger entries? Double sales. I'd sell a slave on paper to one buyer, then sell the actual person to someone else. Keep both payments. Worked fine till children started growing up and asking questions. Judge Fairling opened the ledger to the relevant page. Explain this specific entry. 1 female infant, 8 years ago. Pike's voice grew quieter. Woman brought me a baby, said the father, was a plantation owner who wouldn't acknowledge the child. Paid me to find a safe placement. I took her money, then sold the child on paper to Cassius Barrow for his ledgers. But I also sold the actual baby to a family heading west. Except, Judge Fairling prompted, except the Western family never showed. Their wagon broke down, they changed their minds, who knows. I was stuck with a child I'd already sold on paper. Had to bring her to Barrow's place and pretend like the first sale was the real one. Lark felt the world spinning around her. The woman who brought me, was that my mama? Pike nodded, reluctantly. Young woman, well-spoken, said her name was Sarah, had some education, could read and write. She loved that baby fierce, but she knew she couldn't keep her safe where she was. What else did she say? She made me swear an oath. Said if anything happened to her, if she couldn't come back for the child, there was papers hidden that would set things right. Made me touch the judge's ring when I swore it. That's why you kept the ring, Mercy said suddenly. You were bound by an oath sealed with that crest. Breaking the oath would bring consequences. Pike nodded miserably. She said the child would know the sign when the time came. Said there'd be a song, and papers, and a seal that matched. Lark touched her locket. The blue wax. That's your seal in my locket? Judge Fairling examined the locket under his magnifying glass. Yes, this is definitely an impression from my ring. Someone who had access to my office and sealing wax made this mark. Who? The judge's expression grew thoughtful. There's only one person who had regular access to my private office 8 years ago, my law clerk. A young woman named Sarah Whitmore. Lark's breath caught. Sarah? Brilliant legal mind. She helped write some of the most complex manumission clauses I've ever seen. But she disappeared suddenly one winter. I always wondered why. He looked at Lark with new understanding. You have her eyes, and her ear for legal precision. She was my mama? I believe so. And I believe she used her legal knowledge to protect you the only way she could, by hiding manumission papers where you'd eventually find them, tied to signs only you would recognize. Mercy held up the scorched quilt binding. The clause in here, it's written in a law clerk's hand, precise language, proper terms. And it refers to a girl with a river song. Your hymn, Lark. Ephraim Lyle examined the binding carefully. This is legitimate legal language, he confirmed. A conditional manumission clause that would stand up in any court. All the conditions have been met, the river song performed, the proper witness present, the seal matched. Then she's free. Cassius asked. She was always free, Judge Fairling said. The original sale was fraudulent. Pike had no legal right to sell her to anyone. A cheer went up from the crowd. But Judge Fairling raised his hand for quiet. However, there's still the matter of guardianship and proper placement. Miss Lark, you're still a child. You need proper care and protection. Cassius stepped forward. Your Honor, if it please the court, I'd like to request formal guardianship. I know I ain't been the best master, but maybe I could try being a better guardian. He looked down at Lark. I owe you my life, child. That breathing song of yours kept me alive when my own body was giving up. If you'll have me, I'd like to do right by you from now on. What would that mean? Lark asked. It means proper schooling. It means wages for any work you choose to do. It means a legal guardian who answers to the court for your welfare. And my songs? Cassius smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. Your songs are yours to sing wherever you please, Mercy spoke up. If it helps, I could assist with schooling. There's much a bright child could learn from books and proper teaching. And old Moses? Lark asked. Moses will be paid wages for his work, same as any free man, Cassius promised. No more overseers, no more cruelty. Judge Fairling nodded approvingly. Then let it be recorded. Pike, you're sentenced to 5 years hard labor for fraud and forgery. Cotter, you'll make restitution for the false papers. Cassius, you're granted guardianship contingent on proper care and education. He lifted his gavel. And as for you, Miss Lark, formerly property, now ward, soon to be educated young lady, do you accept these arrangements? Lark looked around at the faces watching her. Some curious, some kind, some still skeptical, but free faces all, people who now had to treat her as a person, not property. I accept, she said clearly. The gavel fell with a sound like thunder. As the crowd began to disperse, several people approached Lark. The doctor wanted to know more about her breathing technique. A minister asked about the healing hymns. 2 ladies inquired whether she might be willing to teach their children some of her songs, but it was old Moses who said what mattered most. Your mama would be proud, he told her quietly. She hid papers and songs and hope, and waited for the day you'd be old enough to claim them. That day come at last. Do you think she's still alive somewhere? Moses considered this carefully. Don't know, child, but I know she's in every note you sing, in every law that sets folks free, in every courthouse where truth wins out over lies. The sun climbed higher as they prepared to leave the courthouse steps. Cassius needed to settle his debts, some forgiven due to Pike's fraud, others requiring the sale of his back pasture. But he'd keep the house and enough land to farm properly. More importantly, he'd sleep with a clear conscience. Mercy invited them all to take dinner at her house before the long ride home. As they walked down the courthouse steps, Lark began to hum. Not the root song this time, not the breathing hymn, but something new, something that sounded like gratitude and hope and morning light on water. Other voices joined in Mercy's clear soprano, Cassius's rusty baritone, even Deputy Crowder's surprisingly sweet tenor. The hymn rose and blended, filling the air with harmony. By the time they reached Mercy's gate, half the town was humming along. That evening found them on Mercy's porch, watching the last light fade from the sky. Lark sat in a rocking chair, her own choice with the rescued quilt draped over her shoulders. Mercy had carefully stitched the blue ribbon into the quilt's burned edge, repairing the damage Pike had done. What happens now? Lark asked. Now you learn to read properly, Mercy said. Learn numbers and history and geography. Learn enough to make choices about your own future. And the songs? The songs are yours to keep and share as you see fit. Some are for healing, some for directions, some just for the joy of making music. Cassius rocked slowly in his chair, his breathing steady and strong. I've been thinking, he said, about what you said back in the courthouse, about your mama hiding hope in songs and papers. Yes? Makes me wonder what else is hidden in plain sight. What other children are carrying freedom in their pockets, waiting for someone to recognize the signs? Lark touched her locket, where the blue wax seal caught the last rays of sunset. Maybe that's why the songs get passed down, so the signs don't get lost. Maybe so, Cassius agreed. As full darkness settled over the valley, oil lamps began appearing in windows throughout the small town. Warm squares of light in the gathering dusk, each one representing a family, a hearth, a place where people could rest safely. Lark pulled the quilt closer around her shoulders and began to hum again. Softly this time, just for the pleasure of it. The blue ribbon in the quilt's edge caught what little light remained, a bright thread stitched into something larger and more beautiful than it had been before. The hymn drifted across the porch and down the lane, carrying with it all the hope and healing and hard-won freedom that one small voice could hold, and all the promises that tomorrow's light would bring. In the end, some songs never finish. They just find new voices to carry them forward.